back to the Catch Podcast. Today it's me, Hadassah. It's Taylor. It's Andrew. And today we're talking about generations. And we're talking about why God uses generations. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to do a fun little game, exercise. Okay, everybody close your eyes.
Oh, wow.
Okay,
We're fully
on
immersed
the count
now.
of 3, you have
We
to
didn't know what was
say
happening here.
the
Sorry.
first Bible character that you think of when it comes to generations. Okay?
All right.
Because God works in generations, and we read our Bible, and so we should know somebody. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3.
Abraham.
I knew that was going to happen. I knew that was going to happen.
We can end the conversation now. We're done.
I knew that was going to happen.
We're done.
I just wanted to test my theory. We like testing theories here. Okay, so because of that, I'm about to read this. Hold on. Okay. So, if you don't know, Abraham was like the guy who started it all. He started, he was the first person that God called to begin the Jewish race. So, the promise that God originally made to Abraham it comes from Genesis 17:6, and I will make thee exceeding fruitful, and I will make nations of thee, and kings shall come out of thee, and I will establish my covenant between me and thee, and thy seed after thee, and their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be a God unto thee, and to thy seed after thee. And I will give unto thee, and to thy seed after thee, the land wherein thou art a stranger, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. This meant that Abraham had to leave everything he knew, all his family, to start a new family.
Wow.
And I feel like that is a common experience for Christians, leaving something that is so comfortable, even if it is your family, for this sort of chosen family of Christians that God has. Like, it's like he rips you away from your bio family to this chosen family.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever experienced anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's an entirely different experience, right? Because we tend to throw around the term family a lot, but it's a whole different dichotomy, right? Because your blood family is someone that you have to be with, right? Your church family is too, but oftentimes people feel like it's something that they choose when it's not, right? You're called to a certain house, right? A certain body of Christ, or division of body of Christ. Or I should say section. That's a better word. That God has called you to. But it's funny because that we all started with Abraham, because I mean, like, to start a whole nation from one person is like a heavy, heavy, heavy thing. But I think what's really powerful about it is the seriousness that he took with it, right? And the covenant that he made with God about it, right? He was willing to, and I think this is really important, especially when it comes to talking about generations, and especially as men of God who want to produce and have a family and then therefore produce generations after it, right? He was super, super big on prioritizing God, even though God had given him, right, a generation and given him that blessing. He was so focused on keeping that promise with God that even though something, his son, that in the naked eye can seem like a part of that promise, he was ready to give up.
That's crazy. Yeah.
He was ready to give that up just to maintain that covenant with God, which I think is really, really crucial, because God works in generations, and we see how God he'll bless generations and he'll curse generations, right? And it goes both directions, right? We even see that with Abraham, right? You know, he tries to help God, and he has a child with Sarah's handmaiden, right? It produces a whole nother line of a whole generation that would oppose the generation God had for him. Till today, which is absolutely crazy. But yeah, I think it's just it's very powerful, that understanding that Abraham had about understanding what it is to really produce a generation, right? And it had nothing to do with his own seed, but everything with what God had given him, which is a really good point.
Yeah, which I feel like that's why every drop of blood that Jesus sacrificed was important for the things that would happen in our bloodline.
Wow.
Right? Our biological bloodline, right? Like, we can come into this chosen family, and many people might be like, man, well, I don't want to forsake my biological family. And of course, the Bible doesn't encourage us to do that. Of course, instead of if they're against the will of God.
Right.
And they're against God. But there are certain things in our biological bloodline that it cannot far exceed what our chosen bloodline and the chosen blood that Jesus has really called us to be a part of. And so, Abraham, great example. I think most of all, like, I think we talked about this in like podcasts ways ago. And we were talking about how Abraham, coming from such a line of paganism, that to just join a whole new religion. Man. Wow. A whole lot of faith.
Start a whole new
and to walk away. Like, you literally, not only did he leave home, like, he left that entire region.
Exactly.
He's just roaming.
Left everything he knew.
Yes.
Left everything he knew, and what he was going to was never known to any man that has walked that earth. So it was just like, wow, just for him to start a whole nation and just for generations and generations to come. Like, we look at the stars today and we're like, this is what the generations that God has promised Abraham. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, God really does stay true to his promises. So
Yes, he does.
And one thing that I've been thinking about lately is the fact that not only does God work through generations, he works through messy generations. Like, he works through family dysfunction. And that's like very crazy to me.
True.
One of the other things I was thinking about when God gave Abraham that promise, not only did he give him like the promise that he was going to have all these generations, but he even promised them that they were going to go through slavery. Like, he told him straight up, like,
that is so true.
the things that were about to happen.
And then kings would come out of him.
Yeah.
So that's also
The
prophesying David and
Yes.
all those
The
kings,
whole
King
story.
Asa, Josiah, all those
The
kings.
next 400 years.
Yes, that's like he straight up told
He
him
told him
like they're gonna
everything.
be.
And you would
enslaved
think
for
as a
400
person,
years.
I'd be like, oh my goodness, ain't no way.
Like, actually, Lord, that's okay.
Right,
That's okay.
right. And the funny thing, the what it came out of was Abraham's doubt at first, because when God first tells him, Abraham's like, okay, it kind of goes on in his life, but then he's like, for lack of better words, he says, prove it to me, God. Like, how is this gonna? And he says, okay, and he kind of takes him into this dark trance, and then, like you said, prophesies the next 400 years. It's crazy.
Literally.
It is amazing.
But the one thing I do like, okay, going from Abraham, and then we have Isaac, and then we have Jacob. And I think the story of Jacob also, like, fascinates me in terms of, like, how God introduces himself to Jacob. Because a lot of times, and actually not even just Jacob, a lot of characters in the Bible where I was like, I'm the God of Abraham, I'm the God of Isaac, I'm the God of Jacob. Like, when God is introducing himself to you, he's introducing himself through your generations.
Wow.
And so
crazy.
it was like, when I think about that, I'm like, man, like, when we first came into the faith and when we first came into Christianity, it was really based off of our parents' relationship with God. It was based off of
That is so true.
they really were into
so
church,
true.
how they were really into religion. We weren't really into it. But it's not until we had that experience for ourselves where God started to introduce, like, I'm the God of your father, I'm the God of your mother,
That's
I'm
so
the
true.
God of the people that you've been going to church with your whole life.
Yeah.
And yet now you get to know about me through them.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, because I was going to say, because a lot of things for us, we can look at our pastors. And so it's like, if he's their God, like, that, if that God can do this for them, he could do that for me too. And I think, dang, like, that's so powerful.
Yeah.
That he would introduce himself through people you trust, through people you've already, like, their life has already been that testimony. And so you already have the proof. And he's like, yeah, I did that. And if I did it for them, I could do it for you. And I think that's so cool.
He
That's a
uses
great
generations as a testimony
point.
to the next generation.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Something you said before, you were talking about bloodlines, which I was thinking about a lot, right, in preparation for this. There is this one person in the Bible. I can't remember. I tried to find the story. It's hard to find. It's and especially when you read your Bible every day and it just kind of stacks up, then you kind of lose where you're back at, and you're kind of all over the place.
Write it all down.
Right. But there's this one situation with this one guy. I know it sounds super vague. I can't remember his name, but I promise you it's in the Bible. And if somebody finds it, put it in the comments, please. This one guy messes up really, really bad. Really, really bad. And as a punishment, he says every person in your bloodline, every male in your bloodline from here on out will have some type of, in modern day terms, terminal disease. So it would be cancer, diabetes, like arthritis, dementia, like those type of diseases. He said from here on out, because whatever he did was so bad, from here on out, everyone in your family have that. And I was just kind of like, I was like, why? Like, I can meet someone not knowing, like someone today who has cancer, and lo and behold, they're from his lineage. And it's like, you got this simply just because your great kind of messed up. And I was like, why is that kind of like that, right? And I was like, okay, well then let's balance it out, right? He'll still bless people, right? Because like you were talking about with Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, there's so many situations where the Israelites are in where God simply did not kill them because of the promise he made to Abraham, right? But I kept thinking, I was like, why? Why is that such a big thing? Why is that such a big thing? And then I started thinking about the story of Saul, right? And Saul kind of gives us a kind of a 3 strikes out situation, right? Where he kind of messes up 3 times, and each of those 3 times he loses something, right? First time, God has sought out another. He's still on the throne, right? And not everything has been taken away from him. Next, he loses the throne, right? Next, no one from your bloodline will ever sit on the throne, right? And it's like, and we see this because here comes David. You lose Saul and Jonathan, then Solomon takes out the rest of all of Saul's kids, right? And it's like, dang, that's a wrap for that line. It's like, why is that? And I was thinking about it, and I was just like, I think what it is God understands. Well, I should say it like this: DNA was God's idea, right? Like that type of like implant is His idea. And our pastor says this all the time. He'll talk about like a generational curse that needs to be broken, right? Or a yoke that needs to be destroyed, right? Or something in the bloodline needs to be destroyed, right? God, above all, understands that spirits transfer through the bloodline, through the DNA, which is a powerful thing, both good and bad, right? And that's important to contrast Saul with David, because David does something, he messes up big time, arguably worse than Saul did, right? But the throne wasn't ripped away from him, right? The kingdom was ripped away from him. The Son of God still comes through his line, right? But the reason being is because, when Nathan comes and says, "Thou art the man," right? He's immediately on his face, right? God sees the heart, right? He sees what was in the DNA, what was in the bloodline. And that's what God was willing to preserve, and that's what God was willing to continue on, despite the risk, if I can put it like that.
Yeah, but to your point though, because of the stuff that was in David and that was in his bloodline, that's also why the sword never left his house.
Very true.
And that's also why there's
very true.
Read 1st and 2nd Kings. Chaos, so much chaos. Like the North and the South, they had good kings, they had horrible kings, they was taking out their loved ones. Like, it's very chaotic. And so I was thinking along those same lines, because I'm like, why is it so important that God works through generations? Like, why isn't it like, I feel like we would think that it's more fair. Like, if I lived a good life, you bless me and then start all over with my kids, They're good. Give them good stuff. If they're bad, punish them. But I think it is to your point about DNA, because it's like, if I have this horrible trait of, I don't know, gambling, let's say, and it continues in my kids, they're facing those same traps, those same temptations, and are prone to doing my mistakes and worse.
Yes.
So it makes so much sense that those punishments would be through the generations, because it's like, like when you realize that that's in you too, and you have this punishment that's kind of like a warning, or like something that is keeping you from repeating the sins of your father, I think that is an amazing grace in and of itself. Like, the punishment is grace in and of itself because you're realizing what's in you without having to go through those same exact things yourself. And it's not like, again, it's not like if you turn your life around, it's not like God is going to continue. Like, even with the kings of Israel, those that did well brought blessings, and those that did evil brought curses. And so it's not like God is unjust. It's just he knows what's in you.
He knows what's in you.
Better than you know what's in you.
So interesting, because now, more I'm thinking about it, I'm like, from a biological standpoint, what pumps blood? Your heart.
Facts.
Your heart pumps blood. So when you have this thing in your bloodline, you can see what's in your heart. It will transfer into your children's heart. That's why I feel like it's so important for individuals in terms of them wanting to have kids, because I've like heard lots of stories from people where they were like, they have like these issues with their parents, and they were like, because I had these issues because my parents, and I just wish they never had me. Because it's like, why would you jack up my life knowing good and well you know the things within inside of you? And so I always think about that, and I'm like, really, people think about it. If you want to have kids, do not jack up their lives.
Really?
Not. Like, if you feel like you truly are not ready to bear the responsibility of their hearts, of their emotions, and how they feel and how they need to be raised, it's like, do not think about having children, because what's in you is going to be in them ultimately.
Yes. It comes back to the kids. And I like how you said, you was like, the punishment is the grace, because you can mess it up and your kids can mess it up even worse and compounded trouble, right? And I think that's the reason why, one of the reasons why God got so upset with Saul when he did not take out the Agagites, correct. I remember Minister E preached that once. He broke that down so well.
Yes, he did.
Where, like, very clear instructions: kill everything and let nothing survive, because God knew what was in that bloodline. And because of his disobedience, the bloodline continues, and we get the entire story of Haman and Esther. The entire story.
He almost took out all the Jews because you didn't do your job.
Because you did not do your job. Bloodlines are so important to God. And especially because that's his, only he can see that, right? Which is so crucial, because we can't see it. The best we can do is, or try to do, is plan for our kids, right? And that's one generation, but God sees so much. The whole story of Joseph is based off of preservation of an entire generation that would happen generations later. That's the whole point of the story. That's the whole reason why he has that dream, is so he can preserve the world. Literally the entire world.
The entire known world. Actually.
Yes.
That's crazy.
Exactly.
It's amazing.
There would have never been a promised land if Joseph didn't, if he wasn't in prison. No promised land without the prison.
And then no tribe of Judah to bring about our Savior. Like, you're kidding me?
Wow,
And then you talk about Paul, that comes from the tribe of Benjamin, and all of these other people that come from all of these different tribes, because it was on Joseph's shoulders, which is like living proof, like, to anybody that is watching, like, when you're living this life, you're not just living it for you, you're living it for generations that will come after you. So because of that, it's like, you can't make those small little moments of temptation and sin into a monument. So it's like,
And I feel like it's easier to say that our lives don't matter. And it's easier to say, like, nobody cares. But people do care. And someone is watching, whether you're affecting them positively or negatively. And you'd be surprised the small things that really resonate with people and stick with them for the rest of their lives. And you are shaping people, whether or not you want to acknowledge it. And I feel like, especially now with, like, social media and all that, like, we're constantly influenced by people we don't know. And so we're constantly shaping each other's lives. Like, I could read a comment that changes the way that I think forever. And so it's like, you, as hard as it is to bear that responsibility, it is our responsibility. There's no escaping it. I do influence someone with every decision, big or small.
Yes.
I just do.
Yeah.
Yes. Being Christ-like, right?
Yeah.
Like, you follow him in everything.
Yeah, yeah.
God is generationally minded.
Mm.
So should you be, right? And I don't know if someone already said it, but like the Jewish culture, like it's all about their children. It's all about generations, setting traditions, going on to the next and the next and the next. It's what it's all about, which is it's just powerful.
Yeah.
It's powerful. There's one more thing I wanted to kind of bring up, which is, I don't know, I was just kind of thinking about this, and it just kind of came up. It just kind of came up when I was thinking about this, and I'm going to ask you guys what you think about it. I was still stuck on it, like the question, the prompts. Why is God such a generational God? Like, why? Like, we understand he uses generations. I mean, we have plenty of examples, right? We understand that he communicates through generations, right? Each and every person's name in the Bible means something, right? And we love those chapters of the Bible where, and so begat so-and-so, and so begat so-and-so, and so begat so-and-so, right? But even in those moments, understanding that each of those names means something, God is still speaking, right? So he'll use generations to communicate, right? And we know he uses bloodlines, he'll bless bloodlines, he'll curse bloodlines. We know all that. But I was just like, but why? Like, what for? And I don't know, this just kind of came into my mind. I asked what you guys think about it. But I was like, something that we're big on, right? Everything we're bound by here is time, right? Everything is time-based. Everything affects, right? Your life, that's time, right? When you'll have kids or generations, that's time. Everything is based off of time down here, right? But outside of time and eternity, what is like, what is that baseline, right? Here we have seconds, minutes, hours, right? That's how we measure time and things go on. But it's like outside of that, how do you measure existence, if even possible? And I was just thinking, I was like, maybe, I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. I was like, maybe the reason why generations are so important to God is because generation serves as God's timetable.
Wow.
Like generation to generation to generation, right? God is not so worried about days and years, right? He says a day is 1,000 years, 1,000 years is one day. That's no biggie to him. But generation after generation after generation, I can imagine God, if we can say it like this, counting the generations until his son comes, right? And it's like, okay, this is all I got left. This is all I got left. You gotta keep going like this, and because like even when you see Jesus dealing with the disciples, right? And this is his first time him being, bound by time in a sense. He's he has 3 years, right? And he's an age, right? And he's kind of bound by this time. But he gets so frustrated because he has to put in them what will serve so many generations following in such a small amount of time. Yeah. So to a God whose timetable is generation after generation after generation, you're trying to smash all that into 3 years. Like, I can understand the frustration. Right. Like, no, you 12. Like, you have to, what you write is not for who you can see and who you can talk to. It's for generation after generation after generation, right? So I was just gonna ask you about that. What do you guys think about that generation? I feel like that's just God's timetable.
That makes so much sense, because even in that same, I think when Jesus was talking to his disciples about that, I guess the boy that had what did he have? He had a devil within him.
Okay, yeah.
And the disciples could not cast him out and whatnot. And so they went to Jesus. He was like, how long must I suffer with this generation?
Yeah, that's very true.
How long must I suffer with you all? So I think that is such a great point. And I think he's a generational God because I guess he wanted to show us faithfulness, like what
facts.
faithfulness is.
Yeah.
To be faithful from generation to generation and still remain the same. I was faithful to this generation. I'm faithful to the boomers. I'm faithful to Gen X. I'm faithful to Gen Y. Gen Z. Now to Gen Alpha and all the way to Beta and whatever else generations come up. But I guess he wanted to show us how faithful he is and how he always remains the same. He's constant.
Yeah.
So yeah.
He is constant.
I love that. Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, because why else do we read all the little random stories about Methuselah and Enoch and whatever?
Right. What is there for?
They didn't matter, and if they weren't a mark of that time and that generation and God's love for this people, you know? And I think that God works through generations because his will and his plan is too heavy for one person to carry.
Facts.
It's so beyond what we could plan, what we could imagine, or what we can carry mentally, physically, emotionally. It takes generations because I know by myself I could not accomplish God's will for
all of that. Woo.
Like,
much.
no.
No. There's no
way.
There's just no, that's not going to happen.
So I think it's like, because we are bound by time, it's just like it's impossible for God's will to be fulfilled in one person.
In one time.
But an extension of that person.
A generation, a bloodline. A bloodline. There you go.
Now I'm understanding why in The Lion King.
Okay.
Bring it up. That's all right. This is back when Disney was saved, y'all. Disney would get out of the prayer closet and then write these movies.
The circle of life. You know, we always sing that song. And I was like, what does that even mean? And it wasn't until I was in the theater and they had the live action version. This is the only thing I really liked about the live action version.
Okay.
Was the fact that they actually showed the process of life and how we're all connected. And with that, you seeing Mufasa, then from Simba, and then that transition of power. But that we're all connected in this big thing. And it's circling around in our day to God. Like all the generations, what they're going through, what they had to suffer, their own journey, it's all circling right back to God.
Yeah.
And I feel like in almost every generation, if you look at the 70s and 60s, every single time period, you've seen it's circling back to God because it's all connected and it's all about this big plan that he has prepared for each and every single one of us.
Big plan that he has for us.
So I think, that is just such a, wow, this episode.
Yeah.
That is so good.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, if you were to think that God and his plan could exist in one person and one time frame and one willpower and one generation, oh my gosh, you're so small-minded.
Yeah.
Like, God had the whole thing called for at the beginning.
Yeah.
Let there be lights. He knew fire and brimstone at the end. From the whole thing, God sees everything, right? And to think that everything is just tied in one generation or one part, right, is very ignorant.
Yeah.
I would say.
I agree. But thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. Thank you for being a part of this conversation. And just know that God's will is bigger than you, but it includes you. No matter the chaos, no matter your chosen family or biological family, God's will is being performed in your life if you let him in. So thank you so much for joining us, and we will
catch you later.